the waterfowl guide or the Western guide. And so I was driving up the road one day. Oops, got something going on there. So I was driving up the road one day and I had to make up my mind. What was I going to do? Was I going to finish the Western guide or the Eastern guide? I forgot. With technical difficulties. This is not full screen right now, right? Share. Can you hear me there still?
Yeah, I think it's fine.
No, you can.
Oh, no, you're right. It's not full screen. So if you click on a slideshow, it should be full screen.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. I'm really done without my daughters, you see. And so in any case, I'm driving up the road and I have to make a decision. Do I want to finish off the Western guide or the waterfowl guide first? And then it hit me, I had to do the waterfowl guide first. Why? Because I'm like Winston Churchill, right? I love not knowing. And so to improve is to change. And so I love change. I love not knowing. And so the waterfowl guide was going to be really a unique guide for me, rather than the Western guide was just going to be like the Eastern guide, albeit hopefully a little bit better, right? And so, all I needed to do, I needed some photos of the tundra. I needed to sort of meet the hunting brigade fraternity and other wetlands conservationists. So it hit me. If I drove right across the country, I could meet all these groups. And there's only one road that goes to the Arctic Ocean, and that is from Fairbanks. So if I drove across to Fairbanks, I could take this road, the Dalton Highway, 200 odd miles up to the Arctic Ocean, and then drive back home. So it was great. And so I went back home, as you do, you go back home, you make a sudden announcement, a rush of adrenaline on social media, and then you think, oh my goodness, did I do the right thing? In any case, I'd made this announcement, and you may be asking yourself, what the heck has Egypt got to do with it? So in any case, I was in Egypt, right, just a couple of months before with the family, and my daughter comes into the room and she says, Dad, she goes, how far is it from here to Cairo, Egypt? I'm like, Sam, come on, how the heck do I know that? Get on the computer and have a look. So I'm like, I'm curious, how far is it? And she goes, it's about 1,000, sorry, I forgot what the distance was, 1,600 miles. Sam goes, okay, great. I goes, how far is it from here to Cairo? Well, as it turned out, it was exactly the same distance from New Jersey to Cairo as it was to Prudhoe Bay. So it's like, holy mackerel. It's like I'm driving to Egypt. In any case, I decided I was going to talk to all these people, and most importantly, I was going to listen, right? So it's not about talking, it's about listening. And ironically, we're talking about listening, and just down the road, like a couple of months earlier, only a half a mile from my house is this big, wonderful tree. And I was taking photographs of it, just as you do, right? And so this guy comes out of the house and he says, what are you doing? I goes, well, I'm photographing this tree. And he says, well, why? I'm like, well, I do these books. He says, come into my house. So I go into the house and he starts asking me more questions. I says, well, actually, I walked around the world for 17 years without talking to anybody. And he says, what I learned was when you don't talk, you hear a lot more. So hopefully, that was a bit of an eye-opener, right? So in that case, very unusual story, that. So you never know who's living half a mile from your house. Ironically, Nat Geo, went to see Nat Geo. And so at the time, he was living in San Francisco. When he got there, the people said, oh, when did you get in? He says, oh, just last night. And he said, oh, which airline did you take? And he said, oh, I didn't take, I walked. He said, you walked? You live in San Francisco? He's like, yeah, I know. I walked from San Francisco to Washington, D.C. to see you. So listen, we all need exercise, but I'm not really recommending that one. In any case, I always stay in fancy hotels. Fancy hotels, places like this. So my old, which I still have, a 2008 Honda Pilot. So this was going to be my hotel for the next 16 months, but it also doubles for some other things, which I will tell you about later. As I said, I always stay in fancy places, type of places that tell you, which one is for a number one and a number two. Okay. And of course, at the time I was living in Cape May. So I'm going to tell this story as I drove across the country up to Prudhoe Bay, starting in my beloved Cape May. And of course, waterfowl are unique creatures, right? So they do these things. They're absolutely fascinating. And so one thing is in winter, nearly all the males look all spanky and bright, but in summer, they look really grungy, the opposite of most birds. So, that grungy we typically call eclipse plumage. So I had to do a different layout to my other book. So I would start with the winter scene where it shows all the males in the nice spanky plumage, as I always do from near to far. And then we would do a scene in summer where, you have the males in this eclipse plumage, and also we can put the ducklings in. And of course, I always put scenes in not just of wildernesses, but where people live. 82% of people live in cities and suburbs. And so it only makes sense that we connect these people to nature. And I'm sure a lot of you folks in Colorado, Denver, or Fort Collins, or wherever, same thing, live in cities. And one of people's favorite birds in many areas of the country is the great mallard. But my books are never just about learning answers. More importantly, it's learning about how to look at birds. Okay, birds in general. And so if I was to ask you, a mallard, what color is its head? You're going to say, well, it's green. Well, actually, it only looks green when it's backlit. And so when you look directly into the sun, as I'm sure you all know, right, its head will look black or purple. Or if the sun is at 90 degrees, it will look green, blue, purple, a whole mosaic of colors. So understanding this is really, iridescence and things like that is really important. Other things like the speculum. This speculum, there's 3 different speculums on the left side of this image, right? So the speculum is that shiny part on the trailing edge of the wing in the secondaries. And so this is actually all the same bird. 3 images taken less than a second apart. So look how the colors change. I always tell people that in birding, color is the root of all evil because it's always changing. You can never master color. Other things you can. And so we create these other things where we could actually show birds how they land, how they fly. Again, it's almost like a slowed down video made up of lots of images. And this book was self-published. It's something I'd always wanted to do and I'm still doing the most recent books. So because it's self-published, I need to sell them, right? So yeah, you're right. I put some porn in there, right? So I can't talk about that. We're in a PCA, so I can't tell you that, a mallard's thing is like member is 9 inches long, but it only lasts for 3/4 of a second. So in any case, you do the mathematics on that one. But as I drove across the country, go through Pennsylvania, and as an English guy where the country is quite small and there's people everywhere, the vastness of America is just incredible. I'm sure, again, same with Colorado, you can leave Denver and all of a sudden you're in these massive, incredible spaces. Pennsylvania is the same. And as you go across Pennsylvania, it's just thousands of square miles of woodland with some rivers going through. And if you look carefully in these rivers, you might be lucky enough to find common merganser. So again, this is a page taken in summer, where the males are actually in eclipse. So those birds sitting on the rock with all the white in the wing, you might think they're females, but they're actually males in eclipse plumage. So always look at the wing pattern. They keep the wing adult male-like wing pattern in summer. The rest of them looks just like females. And of course, the common merganser in winter, behavior in birds is so important. So relatively few birds hang out around the ice in winter in packs and sit on it. Common merganser is one of those. So the flock formations, even if you don't see the birds, the flock formations and where they're hanging out is a massive clue. So a bird's size, shape, behavior, patterns of color are all tied to how and where it lives. So for me, working out all those connections is the fun of it. And that's what we really need to celebrate more. Really looking at birds, understanding their lifestyles as we do other people. Counting birds is great, but it's very hard to just count birds and really look at them or photograph them at the same time. So to a large degree, you've got to work out who you are. And so while most people think I'm a photographer, I'm really not. I'm a bird who just loves looking at the lifestyles of birds. It creates much more of a connection for me. I sometimes get distracted and do other things, but when I sit down and start watching their behaviors and connecting all the dots, that's when I really love it. And of course, we did these double pages in flight. We see birds in flight so often, but often we don't focus on it. So we did double page spreads of birds in flight, and they're all labeled with all the different ages and sexes. But again, it's behavior that's key. So these flock formations, common mergansers usually fly in long lines, sometimes wavy, sometimes like inverted V's like scoters. But that flock formation is such a great clue. But of course, you never really learn until you don't know the answer and trying to work it out. And so there is nothing, no quick fix answers in nature. So for me, it's to put you on the spot, struggle with it, and that's when you learn. So my books always have mystery photos. So if you can't work out all these different mergansers, then clearly you're going to have to buy the book. In any case, it's not only with their heads up. We often see birds roosting or sleeping with their heads down. And so again, 3 species of mergansers in here. If you look closely, you'll see these subtle differences in shape and size. And so these are all very lifelike. And again, it helps you look at other things, and so you get a more complete picture of what birds look like and their lifestyles. And of course, my books are always a celebration of nature, the backgrounds, right? Because I sometimes think, for me, birding is just an excuse to be out in nature, really. I just love being out in the outdoors. I grew up on a farm, and I'm sure that's where it came from. But again, wood ducks, my goodness, aren't they stunning, those males, so bright and spanky. How could they ever blend into the environment? Well, it looks like they blend in pretty good to me, because typically they live in swampy woodlands in summer, places like this with their beautiful colors. But even in wood ducks, nothing's by accident. If you know wood duck well, one of the ways to identify them, probably the best way, is by their longer tail. Well, why would they have a longer tail? Well, what else lives in woodlands like that? Sharp-shinned hawk, Cooper's hawk. Guess what they have? A longer tail. So that longer tail is a rudder. It's a rudder for steering around trees. So again, it's just an adaptation to how and where they live. And so they actually nest up in tree holes, often very high up in the trees. And if you haven't seen it, you've got to go on YouTube and see the leap of faith, where hours old, the ducklings just flutter to the water, to the ground, bounce off, and off they swim with mum. Just incredible. So yeah, everything in nothing in nature is by accident. Then Chicago here, again, with wood ducks and some introduced mandarin ducks. And of course, I'm not going to get into geese, though. Actually, I did spend a lot of time out in Denver looking at geese back in the day. Not long ago, it was all lesser Canada geese, but I worked out I could never find these lesser Canada geese. So I think today there is no such thing as lesser Canada goose. Most of the geese around Denver just look like the geese on the East Coast. So I think they're just regular Canada geese, probably the ones from the interior, they're called. And ironically, there is a third thing of small Canada geese with a different DNA structure, which is almost certainly the dark ones that you get around Anchorage in central Alaska. So yeah, you never know. But it's very easy. We get very biased by terrible authors like me writing books, and sometimes we don't know. So guess what we do? We copy the other authors, and we keep getting it wrong. So hopefully in the waterfowl guide, we changed this. We got rid of lesser Canada geese. So hopefully that'll open up people's minds and really look at it with a new start and think about it differently, and moving on. Of course, birding's in its infancy. We really know nothing. I think people get put on pedestals, but I think you talk to the top birders, they will tell you they know very little. And the reason they know very little is because they're always asking questions. So it's not about what you know, it's about what you don't know. And what you don't know, you only work out is if you keep asking these questions. So the biggest problem for most people, they never ask the question. So it's this asking questions, getting good at asking different types of questions and trying to work out connecting the dots. So that's the great thing about birding. It's never ending, this voyage of discovery. So thankfully, I get it wrong most of the time. So that's why I love it so much, because it's an opportunity to learn and get better. So in a page like this one, think of, the life of a Canada goose. So here's some chicks, right, with the eggs hatching. And then you can just see as they grow through life, how they change their appearance. And of course, in the book, there's text, but it'll talk about all sorts of things, how the feathers grow, which is really important to understand. There's a wacky one back there with a white neck. Well, why is that? Is that a hybrid? Or is it just where the black is actually replaced by white, that's what it is. So, all sorts of interesting things. The more you look, the more you see. And so as I went across the country through Chicago and these places, started going to more open areas, Wisconsin, and then you go to Canada. And of course, being English, I love Canada, because the very, very first thing you do when you get across the Canadian border is stuff your face with English chocolate. Yes, I'm sorry, American chocolate is rubbish. Okay, Cadbury's Dairy Milk, chocolate flakes, Maltesers. Oh my God. So that's what you do the first thing you go into Canada. And in fact, Canada is like a halfway house between England and America. And it got me a little thinking back about the good old days, and why in England is birding so different, so much bigger? So in England, 1.2 million members for the RSPB, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. That's the equivalent of 6 million members over here in one organization. They own 0.5% of England. So the birding lobby in England is more powerful than any lobby over there. And I always tell people, well, if it's big over there, why isn't it as big over here? I mean, the RSPB feel like they're failing and not very good. But if they would have 6 million members over here, you'd be so, so powerful. And so that's our goal. So the only differences between England and here is this. In England, there are very few birds. They're impossible to get close to. They're all small, grey and grungy and hard to identify. It's always chucking it down with rain over there. And none of the sports clubs are named after birds like over here. So other than that, everything's the same. In other words, America has every advantage. After all, I live here. Why? Because the birding is just so much spectacular, the weather too, and you get close to them. And so in any case, I started thinking about it. So I grew up on a farm. Sure, that's where my love of the big countryside began. And of course, how do you get good at birds? You get good at birds through your living room window or your kitchen window. So you have to master the basics. That's how you learn to look at birds, understand their behaviors, get rid of the binoculars, forget all the minutiae, just watch them, how they move, how they fly, their basic patterns, how they interact. So that's how you learn how to become a good bird, by mastering the things that you see every day. Practice makes perfect. And so I thought about how I grew up and how I evolved as a birder, and then also England. So this is England in the 1970s. I can't say it, but yes, it is a male-dominated sport. I know 13 guys personally who have died birding. So it's not even a sport, it's life at the extreme end. And that obviously grew. This is in the 1990s. Today, it's much bigger than that. And so the golden winged warbler that showed up outside of London, 12,000 people apparently went to see it in the first weekend. So we have lots of possibilities here. And for me, I started traveling as a lot of the hardcore birders do. So, I birded really hard from the ages of 10 to 18. Then I went to university, graduated at 21, and started traveling around the world as you do, always loving kids. I was not a photographer. Never picked up a camera until I had to do for the Shorebird Guide. So I'm just a hardcore birder who has become a photographer. Now I'm an old hardcore photographer who gets young kids to carry the camera for me and do my stuff for me. Just joking, of course. In any case, I did the shorebird guide and then the eastern guide. The shorebird guide was popular, but it was wrong because it wasn't lifelike. And then digital photography came along and Photoshop. And of course, Photoshop changed everything, right? Makes everything possible. Good thing about virtual, no ladies come rushing on the stage, right? Okay. In any case, but what is a guide? What is a field guide? I don't know. Do you? What's the point of it? Do you know what the point of a field guide is? I've asked lots of top authors, but I get all sorts of answers. So for me, the point of a field guide is to give people a quick fix answer for just some of the birds. Field guides are really not very good. They don't have much detail. They're really basic. Ironically, just a couple of years back, I was in Africa with somebody who was one of the elite birders in this country. He'd never been a birder, a beginning bird, and since probably the ages of 8 or 9. But when he went to Africa and didn't know any of the birds, he suddenly became a beginner for the first time in multiple decades. And the painted guide, he threw away basically after the first day and started looking at photographs of birds. And I'm like, that guide's no good. And he looked at me and all of a sudden it clicked. When you're a beginner, painted guides are tough. Photos are lifelike. And I always tell people it's like robbing a bank. If I go rob a bank, I'm going to keep doing it if you keep going to take paintings of me. But if you start taking photos of me, you're going to work me out pretty quick. In any case, so what is a field guide? Is it determined by its size? And do they really work? Is this how we teach at school? And how does the brain connect to it? Well, the brain connects to very simple patterns, but it's not, it's very, very basic. So it's a struggle. Ironically, 10 years on, it's very clear. Beginners like much, much more information. Experts want very little. It's the opposite of what you would think. And when you ask most authors, what do they want to accomplish with their book? Very few people, very few authors can give you an answer. Quite surprising. In their case, the book was completely different when it came out, the Eastern Guide. So there's a section on how to use the book. The introduction for me was the most important part of the book, and obviously probably nobody read it, it would seem. So that was a shame. And then part of that was to tell you how to be a better birder. So in America, we never taught. It was really striking when I came here. It never really, magazines, books really didn't show you how to be a better birder. Completely different in England. Every image it showed would talk about how to age it, how to sex it, you know, what was going on with the molt. So you really understood the big picture. And so coming here, we were like 20 years behind where Europe is. And frankly, we still are. In any case, so, you know, you should read the introductions, are really important if you want to become a better bird and how to understand birds. And I'm not a taxonomist. Taxonomy's probably changed since I started the talk and will always keep changing. And birds only live in response to the environment. We don't talk about that enough. But again, where a bird lives, how it lives, its colors, all in response to the environment that it's in. So a number of authors got together and decided from that point on, a lot of the field guides or guides would be done based on habitat, not on taxonomy. Obviously, taxonomy is linked to habitat, but they're not the same thing. So swimming water birds, walking water birds, flying water birds, etc. And of course, with the first book to put the alpha codes in, shorthand, which everybody uses now. So just 10 years ago, this was all crazy stuff. I got heat for it. To be honest, I hate alpha codes, but you know, we're well into the 21st century. And, you know, we've got to think about that. And also we've got to think about the future. So all the kids use the alpha codes as well. And so what was different about the book? Absolutely everything. So the concept of the book was, for the first 6 months, was absolutely wrong. There was not one good review for 6 months that really understood what the book was meant to be about. And so the idea is for you to become a better birder, to how to understand birds, how to go birding through my book. So it's basically a halfway house between reality and a field guide. One way you can see how everything is connected, see things from near to far, different angles, flock formations in the correct habitat. And of course, photographic images Good ones, most are bad, but good ones are far more detailed, far more like life. Again, just like a photo of me is than a painting. Paintings are much nicer. If you look behind my head, you will see, my houses have loads and loads of paintings. My dad's an abstract artist. I don't have a single photograph up anywhere. And I counted at one point, I think I have like 70 paintings up, and they're all bright and abstract. Why? Because we love paintings even more than we do photography. So, so you have to understand when you get a book, do you want it because, you really appreciate the art? Or is it because you actually want to become better? But the concept is to look through the plates and ask yourself, what do you see? Look at the variation. Look at the things that remain consistent. Enjoy the environment, the habitat. There's so much information in the plates. At first, it's overwhelming. People are not used to looking at a lot of detail. It's a problem. And so, like my dad's artwork, it took me 6 months to really get into it. I just wasn't used to it. And so everything is learned, and most definitely my plates are. But please celebrate them, their lifestyles, how they behave. Some of it, the minutiae, the flock formations. So that's the idea. And of course, the text is designed to be interactive. When we did the Raptor Guide, it was a great way to embellish that so we could go into more detail because there's far fewer species. So this is near and dearer to my heart because I can give you more information, their lifestyle, a word I keep talking about a lot, right? How they behave, hovering, how they twist, angle, the angle of their wings, the proportion of it. Why do they have longer tails? Is it for speed? Is it, when they spread them, why do they spread them? Well, when they spread them, it's because they're not moving. So it must help them, like birds with broad wings, for keep them in one place, right? And yet when they put them close, tight together, like with the wings more angled back, that's designed for speed. So when you understand it, it becomes more interesting, how they carry their prey. So I love learning about birds that way. The answers, the names, I really don't give a damn about names. It's like people. Names are not important to me. When somebody's talked to somebody for 5 minutes, they're really, really interesting, then I really, really want to know their name. If there's no connection, I don't need to know the name, or count them, or list them. It doesn't mean anything. And so, all the best birders, they're not really bothered about names. They like working out answers and connections and what's going on. And so, again, the osprey, so they have, really their feet are designed for grabbing onto fish. They turn the fish round head first for dynamics. They do what I do when they get out of the water. They give a little wiggle and a shake to get rid of all the water. So, and it's fun often thinking of it in human terms, because birds really are like us. It's about food. It's about water. It's about breeding, the continuation of the species. So basically everything the bird does, you can really draw parallels with humans. And then, again, the behavior, look at the majesty of these massive flocks of broad-winged hawks. So there's only a couple of species that create big flocks like that. And so you can probably see the Swainson's hawk in there. If you can't, going to have to buy the book again. And as I said, I always, color is actually the root of all evil. So try and think of birds in shades of gray, of black and white, where it's light and dark. It's all about patterns. And so if you look at these birds in black and white, if you take your time, think about the shape, think about the size. Most importantly, think about the patterns. If you learn those patterns, you never really, very rarely do you actually need color to identify birds. And really, when some bird colors are off a little bit or the light's bad, people get really messed up really quickly. The top birders, they don't. It's like me trying to identify me by my color. Good luck. You better learn my size, my shape, my probability, and my behavior. Obviously, my hands are everywhere. My behavior is a little crazy, so I'm relatively easy to ID. Okay, so in any case, everybody complain my books are too big to put in their pockets. They're good if somebody tries mugging you, but so I cheated a little bit, right? So I made a little folding pocket guide so you can put it in your pocket and take it out in the field. Yes, commercial. In any case, getting back to the most important thing here was to meet other people. coming from England, we are taught that all hunters are evil. Okay, they don't do anything for conservation and they indiscriminately shoot birds. And so most birders, literally, they hate hunters with a passion. And over the years, I was quite ignorant because I really didn't know any of the hunting fraternity. But over the years, I started to see more and hear more about just how much they did for conservation. And so I wanted to dig in deeper. So I went to Oak Hammock to see Ducks Unlimited Canada, the headquarters there. But driving up, I was a little anxious. I wasn't sure what to expect. I'd set up to meet all the top dogs, and but driving up the roadway, I was like, wow, look at this. This doesn't look like hunting. It's all about bird censuses and one thing and another. And again, there's bird sightings, nothing about hunting. So I went inside and I was wanting to find out why some of the people I knew were so passionate about hunting. This is a young guy who lives just outside of Cape May, passionate hunter. But really, when you got talking to him, yeah, he went hunting, but passionate conservationist. So the message was so different. So I went chatting to him and I spent a whole day in there talking to him. They were telling me all sorts of stuff. One thing that was striking straight away, maybe a third of the staff actually hunted. 2/3 of them were only interested in wetlands conservation. And one of my issues is we're counting all these birds, but the overarching message is not about conservation. It's about day lists, monthly lists, year lists. That's terrible. We have to change that. The overarching message should be about conservation and connecting people with habitat. Again, the RSPB, 1.2 million members, incredible clout, and they own 0.5% of England. They don't talk about lists and counting. It's not healthy. So hopefully we can learn about that. And so in any case, when I was with the Ducks Unlimited people, I came out there and I was completely invigorated. It's like, I want to be with you. And they were just fantastic. They told me I had to go to Edmonton and meet this other guy who was a really hardcore bird and a little crazy. So they thought it would make a good connection. His name was Pat Kehoe. So I made a plan to go over there. But as you go across the prairie, potholes, the wide open vastness, it's really clear that's a real problem. So farmers, they actually, there's a lot of areas that are, a little dry, so they plow them in. It's hard to take the big machinery around, and it takes away some of the so it increases their land for farming. Unfortunately, that is a massive problem, because that's where we're really losing, losing a lot of our wetlands. So we have Ducks Unlimited does a massive job trying to stop that. It's so critical. And so it's these little fights that are happening everywhere that are so important. But I remember stopping at one of these little potholes and there was nothing there. And I was there for a few minutes and all of a sudden this ruddy duck came out, and then another and another. And miraculously, within 10 minutes, there were loads of ruddy ducks. And all hell broke loose. So the females were fighting, right? They were, you can see them on the left-hand side. They're literally grabbing each other, and this would go on for a minute or two, literally trying to kill each other, it seemed. The males were banging the water, foreheads all, look all mean and evil, look like they're ready for war. Then they would run across the water, trying to attract mates, territorial. In any case, I was absolutely fascinated. And so I spent, probably 5 hours taking notes, watching them photos. Again, it's just, I had places to be and places to go, but just sometimes it's great to be in the moment, forget everything else, and just watch and think and ask questions. Why do they do this? Again, you're going to have to buy, the talk's too long as it is, so you'll have to buy the book and find out. So love it out there, and just all these ducks in all the potholes and different places. I'm sure in Colorado, but I always think it's fascinating how the males would often skedaddle, right? So the males go way north, and probably like warblers and other things. I think warblers actually do the same thing because food is the driving force in nature. So lots of birds, way more than what I think we reckon at the moment, actually go north, because in summer, that's where all the food is. The further north you go, the more food that there is. So the males skedaddle north, often leaving the females, and then you'll often get the different females, different species, and they'll all come together, presumably safety in numbers. Even birds of different sizes. So blue-winged teal would often be with redheads and things like that. So really fascinating. Again, it just creates so many more questions. And of course, for me, I want to connect these groups. That was one of the primary purposes of the Waterfowl Guide, was to connect hunters, birders, photographers, fishermen, everybody together. Because at the end of the day, we're all hunters. I'm a hunter. I hunt with binoculars, I hunt with a telescope, I hunt with a camera. I actually hunted eggs when I was a kid, because that's what my dad and his dad had done. But with a very, very strong conservation message that you only ever take one egg and you never disturb the bird. And so I see us all as one. And for conservation, we have to see each other as one, because conservation comes with numbers. And so I did pages like this, so fishermen could actually try and identify, and hunters, other birds besides ducks. Same thing here, I mean, even more expensive, passerines, blackbirds, and things like that. And so this is actually Calgary, not too far for Edmonton, but I met this nice, low-key guy, obviously not, Pat Kehoe. So I just went in one afternoon and we chatted and chatted. And then it's like, I'll take you out tomorrow if you like. And he really changed my life, really. I've certainly changed the way I looked at a lot of things. And it really opened up my eyes. And so he would say, what do you see, Richard? And I just said, well, a pretty bare, barren field. And then he would start talking about things, about winter wheat and spring wheat. So we need winter wheat. Why? So in spring, all the ditches in the fields where all the ducks nest, because most ducks do not nest in wetlands, they nest in the surrounding farm fields, right? And so if there's no vegetation there, coyotes, foxes go down the ditches and they just clear everything out. And so it's very important that they plant winter wheat. So ditches like this, there's actually vegetation there so the birds can nest safely. In fact, they give Winnipeg University millions every year to design better winter wheat. They select multiple high-profile farmers in the area and subsidize them to plant winter wheat. Why? Because we're all followers. And so we follow the top farmers, right? Same as birders, hopefully follow the top birders. Same thing, we're a nation of followers. So if we could get the right people to lead with the right message, then hopefully everybody would follow. In any case, I could go on for hours, all the things I learned from Pat, but my God, did he rock my world. So places like this are full of ducks with winter wheat. And so Ducks Unlimited, pretty big. Duck DU, Canada and America has over 1 million members combined. So pretty incredibly impressive. In any case, I went off in my fancy hotel, but more importantly than being a hotel, my hotel is actually my blind or my hide. What is a blind or a hide? Well, if you're stood somewhere all night in one place, the birds get used to you. Familiarity breeds contempt. And so they come closer, you don't disturb them. And so it was like what you get in the rest of the world. And so hides in Britain are huge, massive. They have to be. And so they're fraternities. They're fraternities where like-minded people can come in, share knowledge. You can make friends with people and you don't disturb the birds. Not only that, but the birds come closer to you. It doesn't matter if it's freezing, if it's boiling, if it's chucking it down with rain. It's great. So it just encourages you to sit there, be patient and look. Of course, you can educate people, right? So you can put all your paraphernalia around the blinds. So we do have some blinds in this country, but my goodness, we have to learn so much more and do a lot better than that. There's reasons why there are so few birders in this country. You may think there are a lot, but I promise you it's tiny. And this reason we need places like this, encouraging people to drive around on their own in cars is not good for conservation. We need to connect more people to fraternities and help them, educate them, inspire them. Okay, so this is, I was in northern Norway with a couple of guys who 10 years ago, this is what blinds look like in northern Norway, right? Very futuristic. I haven't looked at them recently, but my goodness, I bet they're even more futuristic than that. And so just before I was talking to Ducks Unlimited America, I wanted to give them the distribution rights for this book because I wanted to connect people together. It unfortunately got very close, but no cigar in the end, which I was really disappointed about. But they did ask me, they had a big saving wetlands conference in West Virginia, the place where they took Dick Cheney after 9/11, a huge place, armed guards and all that stuff. 2 weeks before, they called me up and said, we'd like you to open it up and talk to people about connecting people. I thought they were joking. They were not. So I went up and, I did my usual stuff, just a short one. But now people are talking more about, hopefully, about connecting together. We really need to do it. So hopefully some of you people listening tonight can keep that talking about that. It's really important. And, this was before these surveys were published. They're very well known now. So, but I looked at it and I remember being really sort of somewhat frustrated at the time and thought this was absolute bunkum. So it says 45 million people are bird observers, 86 million wildlife watchers. So if that's the case, it's a really, really obvious question, right? Where the heck are they? Who has them? Because if 45 million birders, I don't know who has them. Because if you add all the societies together, it doesn't come to 1 million, and most of that is overlap. So that tells you we have so much we can do better. So we want places going to places like this and celebrating them, not understanding them. So if you go to a mountain pond, there's only a few species of waterfowl that you get up there. So if you know them, then it makes life a lot easier. And of course, when we're out, it's not just about ducks, right, or waterfowl. It's about other animals as well. And so America's just an incredible place. I've driven across it a few times. Don't need to tell you folks in Colorado, but the magnitude of it is just stunning. The volume of birds. I mean, we are so, so lucky, and the vastness of it. And so, one of my favorites, the Harlequin duck, as you know, up in the mountain streams in summer, going down lower in winter, just fantastic creatures. In any case, I went over to the West Coast, cheated a little bit, took a boat up towards Alaska from Port Charlotte, I think it was. And I did the, what is it, the Titanic thing. I went up on the front. Oh my God, they got me off there so quick. But in any case, I had my couple of seconds of living the dream, right? But look at this. Fantastic. Just the skies, the patterns, the mountains. I remember that evening, it was middle of summer, just fantastic. And Alaska is most certainly a different time zone. Massive river valleys, houses floating down, some problems with the spelling on the right-hand side, thax, no N in there. And so, but there's so much we don't know. Waterfowl's arguably become my favorite group of birds now. And even though it's the most studied group of birds, there's so much we don't know. So even talking to Pat Key, I'm like, where do red-breasted mergansers nest? It's like, we don't really know. They nest like New Brunswick. I used to find them in rabbit holes and Nome. But when I drove all the way across the country, guess how many red-breasted mergansers I saw? 0. Through all the maps, right, that show all these birds all over the country. They're all rubbish. They're not. So they're in very, very restricted places. But where the masses of them are, at this point, I don't think anybody knows. So much for that. And even that, all the books were wrong as well with that. So red-breasted mergansers, most of them have black, as you probably know, around the eyes. So all books said these were immature males. Well, I was having a problem doing the book. How come I can't find any adult females without the black? And so I went to look for them in spring up on the Great Lakes, and guess what? Either all these brown-headed ones are gay or something, but to me, they're all paired up with bright spanking males and immature males, which were clearly not immature males, were clearly adult females. And so the older the adult female gets, the more black they get around the eye. So it's probably only immature females or first year females that have no black around the eye. So again, it's just, we know so little about common birds, but the fun is watching them when they're displaying. They get into such crazy poses. I mean, waterfowl, they're the most funky things. I mean, incredible colors, changing their molt patterns, but their behaviors and their sounds are incredible. In any case, obviously, no young kids today, right? Get out of here. Kids love nature. We just need to do a better job of celebrating it. The youth birding scene is doing great in the last 10, 15 years. And so my poor girls had to grow up with me, of course. And, you know, I'm pretty at the extreme end. So no, they're not birders. But Sophie flew up there. We went camping for a week. She didn't look happy there, but you know what? In that week, no phone. She threw it away. Just no TV, no nothing. We camped every night. She just loved being with in nature. A few years ago, took her to Africa for 3 weeks. Same thing. You could go out 6 in the morning till 6 at night. We were always in a queue to get out before 6, and we were always the last in. Not once did she want to go back to the room or anything. And so she's not a birder, but she loves being outdoor. But ironically now, guess what? At the age of 23, 24, or she's actually 24, she starts sending me photos from England saying, Dad, what's this? What's this? And we just co-authored, along with Holly Merker, a book called Ornithotherapy for Your Minds, Body and Souls. So she's really a really important part of that. And frankly, if you want to hear us speak, we've done a couple of interviews, but I am atrocious compared to her. She's just a brilliant speaker. So you should Google her, Sophie Crossley. I think she's probably a couple of videos up on YouTube, which well, you can make up your own mind. But yeah, so the connection for there, but we just got to put it out there and celebrating. So I was feeling my oats for that. In any case, the scenery up there is fantastic. So for me, I take these images of these incredible places. It's a lot of what I do because I'm trying to match the backgrounds to where the birds live. And so, you know, the habitat, the environment is just key in my books. And after all, it's what we celebrate. So then we bring the birds in. So this image has probably got about 15 different images in, you know, flock formations, near and far, landing. So again, very much just a celebration of the beauty and the scale of it up there. And this place, one of the most beautiful places, is Valdez, where the most horrific, one of the most horrific disasters, they're all disaster, I forget whenever it was, nearly destroyed the place. Ironically, what we know now is if we leave disasters alone, nature will clear it up a lot better than us. So Valdez looks great now, but it would have looked better if we'd have stayed away after the mess, which is again seems strange. But for me, it wasn't just about waterfowl. This is not a cuddly toy. This is a real boreal owl. So one of the perks of knowing lots of people, I get to see incredible things like this. But after I dropped Sophie off, the main thing was to go up to the Arctic Ocean, to the tundra. I'd been there, but not for many years. And so I was going to take this truck, my Honda Pilot, up to Dead Horse or Prudhoe Bay. So this is one of the first signs, 414 miles on a truck and logging track. So a little scary, a little exciting. You have to take 2 spare wheels and lots of water, right? So I went up there with lots of friends, the Mosquitoes, and lots of signs up there. Next service, 240 miles. Oof. But some surprises along the way. So they had a big pipeline. And shockingly, there were more birds near the pipeline than away from the pipeline. They like the infrastructure, something I was to really find out about in Prudhoe Bay. And of course, you go through miles of this beautiful landscape where there has to be hundreds of hawk owls. I must be blind because I didn't see one. Never mind. In any case, when opportunities come along, you have to take them. So I had some great man-made curtains, great for sleeping. It's light nearly all the time. I thought I would sleep at night for a few hours and need naps in the day. As it turned out, I would sleep about 3 or 4 hours every night and never sleep in the daytime. just loved it, just invigorated being outdoors. And again, opportunity, learning to look. Birding's all about learning how to look at birds. And so the beauty of it, the colors, the mosses, not seeing any people, the vastness of it, just incredible. You know, I was disappointed by the signs, you know, so I think some of them should be pretty obvious. Don't be cutting trees down, particularly if it's the farthest north spruce tree, but never mind. Sometimes we have to state the obvious, right? And as I said, I took lots of friends with me. Mosquitoes never bothered me. I was warned, but oh my goodness, did I have any idea what it was like? Unbelievable. So when I went, I had a full head of hair, but that changed. Okay, so by the time, that's why you may think it's hereditary, me losing my hair, but it's actually those mosquitoes. Ironically, so why birds travel all around the world is for this. For all of us, right? What's the most important thing? It's our offspring. So these birds basically fly all around the world, Arctic terns and things like that, and shorebirds, for mosquitoes. It's just this glut of food so they can bring up their offspring, so to continue the species. So the further north you go, the more they are, and that's why they take these incredibly massive long voyages. And it's not just me that were driving moidering to death. It was also willow ptarmigans here. And if you watch the ptarmigans, they're trying to shake them off their head and snap at them, and you know, but we all have to suffer for the kids, right? And so finally I got to Prudhoe Bay, and ironically the tundra didn't have all that many birds on it until I got to Prudhoe Bay. Prudhoe Bay, a dead horse, they hate people. Okay, it's oil refineries, you can go there, but they do not want people. They have their own security. You are not allowed to go off the roads. You cannot put a foot on the tundra or you get kicked out. In fact, I was there, I met another English guy who was living in the Ukraine, and so we tagged along together, and we stopped next to this pool with some spectacle eiders there. Within minutes, the security forces were there. They put traffic cones around us, maybe 20 foot out into the road. So they're hypersensitive. The last thing in the world would be to get birders there and somebody got hurt, you know. So they don't want us there, but believe me, it's worth going. In any case, lots of white things up there, but they're all molting, so you'd think you could get close to them. My goodness, can they run? So snow geese, they see you a mile off and they just start running in these big flocks with their youngsters. Of course, Hedwig there is there to look after them. This is not Photoshop, this is a real photograph. So they're fantastic snowy owls. And of course, even the signs up there about waterfowl, snow goose, flight training area. And of course, if you didn't see the spy in the right-hand side of the picture, if you're into that sort of theories, you'll have to look next time. In any case, fantastic place up there. Stayed there multiple days learning about waterfowl. Just so much big flocks of geese. A lot of them presumably first-year birds and not non-breeding birds, summering up there. Whole mosaic mishmash of things, and again, it was a place where I think I sorted out some of the things that don't add up with the Canada geese and the cackling geese. But just to watch things like golden eyes in their incredible displays, just fantastic. In the book, we put mixed flocks in, so barrows and common golden eyes together, and if you look really closely, you might be able to find a hybrid. And so these images are very complicated. Hopefully, they look like what you see outside your window or at the nearest lake, right? Where everything is in focus from near to far. Just keep looking at it. So an image like this is made up of maybe 17 different images, I think, so very complicated. I try to help people to try and replicate them because I feel this is where all books should be. But unfortunately, it's too difficult. So at this point, these books are never going to happen again, I don't think, which for me is terrible. It's pretty tragic. So I did, we'll go to the next. So one of my favorites is the spectacle eider. They're sort of really big bad boys, but they're really mysterious things. It wasn't until about 20 odd years ago they actually discovered where spectacle eiders winter. So they all winter out in the Bering Sea between Alaska, the Aleutians, and Russia, mostly in just a couple of huge flocks. They dive up to 200 feet to get mollusks. Can you imagine that? 200 feet. The ice is frozen around them, but there's so many of them. The heat helps to keep the leads in the water open. And there they are, diving to hundreds of feet down to feed. And then in late May, June, they come ashore to breed. But the boys, they are bad lads. So they stay ashore for maybe 3-4 weeks to have their evil way. And then the males skedaddle back out to sea again to leave the poor females to bring up the offspring. But just in spectacular creatures. The Eider, unfortunately, are the one group of waterfowl that are really struggling. Why? Is because they are in an area where likes of Ducks Unlimited and that and other birding organizations can't protect them. So they are struggling, but just fascinating creatures. And so this is unusual for me. It's sort of out of context, but artistic license. How can you not celebrate something so spectacular as this? But of course, everything has to be a teaching moment for me. So nothing is really by accident, as in nature. And so just look at these and think about them. Why are they colored the way they're colored? What do they have in common? Well, if you look at them all, they all actually have black around their eyes. Why do they have black around their eyes? And ironically, the one in the back has a black arrow under its chin. Well, I haven't seen it written, but it has to be to do with light, right? Baseball players put black around the eyes for the reflections off the lights, right? And so it'll be the same for the Eider, right? So to protect the glare of the sun off ice and things like that, so it doesn't hurt their eyes. And it's the same thing with the V up the throat. So ironically, when you look at common Eiders, all the northern population of common Eiders, guess what they have under their throat? That's right, you guessed it, a dark V. As you come south, they don't, or very few do. So really fascinating. But wow, look how spectacular they are. God, if I was a lady, whew, I'd go for one of those. And of course, we do lots of birds in flight in the book. And also these, are they male or females? Well, actually, most of these are actually females. So when females get older, the hormone levels change, and actually the bright male colors are actually more of the default colors. So the bright colors start coming through. So I think most, if not all of these birds are actually old females. And so if you look at the mallards on the right, this is a good one for garden ponds. If you see some mallards where the bill is like a female bill with a black, whether it's black, but it looks like a really grungy male mallard, invariably that's going to be an adult female mallard. So that's your homework. Go find one. And so as I drove back down on the Yukon Trail or Yukon Highway, just incredible, very few cars. This is in the middle of the day. Can you imagine what this hot springs would be like outside Colorado? And the sign, I forgot what it's called, something of signs, I've forgotten the, I'm sorry. England lost this afternoon. I had a couple of drinks, so that's probably I'm losing my marbles tonight. Big game, European Cup final, and we lost on penalties. So the country is in mourning tonight. In any case, so this is all these signs. This is only a fraction of the signs. They're just thousands and thousands of signs. So it's amazing what you find in the middle of nowhere. In any case, so I drove back home and often think about it, so, what is conservation like in America? What's the future like? Is it dark and gloomy like the skies here, or is it bright and sunny? Well, for me, I think it's really rosy. Actually, I think youth birding is the biggest thing in the last 15 years that's really taken off. And, they are the future. They're better. They use technology. And if we can get more young birders into birding, they become the conservationists. All the leading conservationists in the world start birding as a kid. And between the ages of 7 and 12, they go chasing birds, learning about birds, traveling the world. And then by the time they're in the 20s, they're already dedicating, and many of them, to conservation. So those are the most important people in conservation. There are lots of them coming through now. So that's so exciting. And I know there's a lot of doom and gloom, but, we have all these massive open spaces. But we have to connect more people to the outdoors. help them understand what it's about. You know, many birders don't. It's about learning the lifestyles of birds. It's not about counting them, and it's about a connection, where they live, how they live. If you really understand the lifestyles of other birds, then you're going to want to save them. That's conservation, and conservation only comes with numbers. So if we can come together and see each other as the same, then we will be good. So that's what we have to do, I think, going forward. But I think it's going to be exciting times with all the technology, the webcams, learning more and more about how these incredible creatures go around the world and how they live. And so I think it's going to be great. And so I saw this thing up in Alaska, and I think it sort of sums it up, you know, look out of every window. You know, look for love, look for moose, look for good things. So if that stupid park ranger hadn't put dumpsters for your park use only over the top of it, we'd be good. So we just need to sort a couple of little things out, and life will be good going forward. Get rid of some COVID as well. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening, and I wish you all the best. I'm not sure, Stephanie, are you opening it up for questions or anything?
Yes, absolutely. That was a fantastic talk. Thank you so much. It was very interesting and quite the story and journey, for sure.
Yeah. I survived to tell it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That was great.
Ironically, on the way back, I got a fancy hotel in Minneapolis, and well, it was booked for me. And at 1:30 in the morning, I made one of the bigger mistakes in my life. Well, I wasn't a bigger mistake in my life, but I lay in my bed and like, I do not want to be here. So I nearly went back and sort of slept in the car park in the truck, because I haven't slept as well for decades, you know. So it probably just tells you who I am. I just like being in the, you know, in a sleeping bag, pretty much out under the stars, you know.
Yeah, I've spent a summer doing bird survey stuff and had a very similar setup, and you definitely get to be very cozy in the back of your own truck, and it's just nice to wake up and you're in the middle of a forest already.
Oh, and the best sun, you know, little tinted windows, they see the sunrises. Oh, yeah. It's fantastic, yeah.
For sure. So we'll certainly take any questions that came up from the audience. Lots of comments so far about how wonderful the talk was, and thank you so very much. I don't see, we didn't see many questions come in necessarily.
That's usually the case. I don't know why I scare people off. One thing I would like to ask you to do, so we have just published the Western Guide. I know this is the waterfowl guide, but we just published the Western Guide, which you know, that took 10 years to do, and $250,000 and 11,000 images. So it's free at last, so no more books. So it's the first time in 15 years I'm not working on a book, but the Western Guide is out, and we haven't not published it much because of COVID. I was supposed to be on a speaking tour. And also another book that was actually COVID related, Ornithotherapy for your mind, body and soul, with, as I mentioned, Holly Merker. Holly wrote all the text, brilliant. And it's real, and Sophie did some of the text, some of the mindfulness stuff, and so lots of images. But, you know, you can go to ornithotherapy.com to read about that, or to Crossley Books, and all the books are on there, or Amazon. But that book is really more about connecting people, you know, looking at birds and really understanding them than looking through your window, and really all the benefits. Birds have such health benefits to us that we've not really been aware of, and particularly in Europe, they're increasingly aware of it, and being out with nature is being prescribed more and more for many illnesses. So we talk a bit about that. So please go on the websites, check those things out, and hopefully you'll buy them, enjoy them, and read the
certainly. If you're bored next May and you don't have anything scheduled on the 19th to 22nd, you can come out to our CFO banquet and convention event and bring some books along and go enjoy birding with some Colorado birders.
Well, let's talk about that. I would love to know. As you know, we were going to do something like that this spring, for nearly the month, so COVID put the kiboshes on it. And sometimes it's hard to, get momentum, but I would love to do it. I'm for the first time in my life, I'm actually a free man. I don't have any business, not many business responsibilities and kids and all that good stuff. So I'm going to be free as a bird now. So
Yeah, don't jinx yourself, but
Richard, Luke George has a question.
yeah, we do have one question.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, George. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved your enthusiasm and just sort of the holistic, approach that you take to it. And I teach undergrads at Colorado State University in the Fish and Wildlife program. And one of the things I've always struggled with is, how do you talk about the bad stuff that we're seeing? They're aware of it. I mean, they probably know more about the ins and outs of climate change in many cases than I do. And I've always in the past thought, well, I need to be positive. I need to be like, we can do this. But I also feel at some point you need to acknowledge that this is a sad situation we're looking at. And I don't know. I just want your thoughts on that.
Well, climate change is disastrous. Is going to be increased. You can't. But I think with kids, I don't do it too much because ultimately the kids are way more informed than what we are in many cases. They read a lot, so I don't dwell on it and too much. They find their way there to conservation. If you look at all the major movements in the world are always done by students. They're not done by old fogies like me, It's actually, like in the Middle East and all that, it's always college students that lead it. So young people are more conservation minded than older people. So if you talk to my daughter, she's always mentioning things to me. She's not a hardcore birder or anything, but so I think for most young people, you don't have to force it down their throats personally. I think they get there and fight a lot harder than what we do. I think we need to learn from them. If it's real beginners and real young kids, for me, it's just getting them into getting their hands dirty almost. One thing we have to stop doing is names. It's everything is what is it? It's a terrible question. What is it? Because it's like you're going with a tour group, and if you say what is it, well, guess what? Most people can't do it. If they can't do it once, twice, three times, they'll never try again. It's humanity. And so we have to stop this and try and teach people how to look and make it about discovery. And then we can attach that discovery to education, as in, the climate is getting warmer, so it's getting tougher for things. But it's really then more about the questions, right? Well, if the climate changes, what do you think this animal or bird is going to have to do? So I would do more teaching like that than really telling them the world's falling to pieces, because they see enough of it, Luke, online, believe me, and they absorb it a lot better than clearly older people are absorbing it.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is just making it more popular. I look at Britain's the same. So I've told you about the 1.2 million members, and just so you know, the National Trust has 10% of the population as members. Okay, I mean, so the potential here is just so massive. It's connected, but it's the young people. So that mob that mob of young men chasing birds, you could argue is a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing because it gets lots of visibility. They're in the papers all the time, so that's not good. But what it does, it makes it trendy for young people to be a birder, because birding's not exactly a fashionable thing. And so you got to put the balance on things. So it made it fashionable for me. I was a I was asked to sign pro at soccer and cricket, you know, go training with the pros at 14. I turned them down because I was already obsessed with birding. My biggest failure was that all my friends went into conservation in their 20s. And frankly, I didn't till I was, you know, late 30s, 40. And it was guilt almost. But most people go into conservation, and most of the world's game changers start when they're young. And they get to conservation on their own. They don't need us telling anybody, you know. And today, that's before the internet. I mean, you know, I've talked to a lot of kids, and they really know what's going on. So just get them into birds or snakes or toads or frogs. Just get them into anything outdoors, nature, and they'll get. You know, it's a pyramid. You got to get the masses, and then, you know, and then as that pyramid gets smaller, it gets more serious. And that, you know, so if you get 1,000 kids into it, you know, dozens and maybe 100 are going to get into conservation in a serious way. If you only get 10 kids into it, then, you know, you're not going to win. So it's about volume for me. Everything's about volume, and then the rest will take care of itself to some degree.
Nice.
Easy going crowd are going soft on me tonight, Nick.
Except for the philosophical question from Luke.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
Listen, the kids of the future. I mean, it's, you know, and you know, we did a lot with kids, massive amount. When I started 15 years ago, there were hardly any kids birding. That's thankfully it's changed. You know, we some guys, some really great people, unsung heroes, the best you never see. You know, you see these, I guess, like me, you know, people in the spotlight, but there's some incredible people. A guy called George near Washington, Tim Keyes in Atlanta. Tim Keyes, you know, we talked, I'd forgotten about doing bird races. He set up this bird race, and a number of young birders in the Atlanta area based on this, brought in because of this bird race. I mean, incredible. Nobody will talk about him. And it's just fantastic. I mean, game changing, you know. And again, some George and some of the others in Washington just have made hundreds of kids into real birders. So some really inspirational people, which we don't do a very good job over here putting the real leaders in the spotlight. So hopefully, you know, in some areas, some organizations, we could do that a bit better, you know.
I was thinking recently how we love to watch birds, but how many birds love to watch people? And, you know, you mentioned birds are in certain habitats because they have certain needs. But do birds ever leave those habitats just for the sake of sightseeing, for example? I was just trying to get into birds' heads recently.
They wonder, but I think the males and probably the young females that go sightseeing, but they're not for the sights unless you count the opposite sex, you know. But they need to learn how to breed, really. I guess you'd call them teenagers. They go wandering, but I don't know. I mean, it's a good question. It's so many things, you know. It's like the rarities showing up. So cave swallows in Cape May, we get hundreds of them. And people said it's because they're getting commoners, so lots more were showing up. I think it's the opposite way around. I think birds that wander have a propensity to wander, you know, those species actually expand their range because of the teenagers. So like with humans, you know, so mankind has, well, theoretically, you know, has gone on and evolved and done so much more. It's not, again, because of old people, it's because of young people who do things and take bigger chances. You know, the risk reward is completely different values for young people to old people. So old people are very conservative. Young people, I was certainly one of them, you know, took, you know, risks. You know, like I told you, 13 guys I know lost their lives birding, taking big risks. You know, they're all pretty young, you know. So I think birds the same thing. So some species take risks to further the speed.
Well, maybe that's how migration originally evolved.
Yeah.
And now that some conditions are harder in many habitats, maybe that's pushing some birds out to vagrate more, for example.
Yeah, well, they're going to change. They have to change. Some will adapt and thrive, and I would imagine more will go the other way. So, some will, but it's the speed of it, right, Nick? It's the speed that's the real problem. But
So we do have a question that came in. Sorry, I thought we were done. So Teresa asks, her 12-year-old is obsessed with birding. What resources would you recommend to help encourage her to keep following that passion?
That's easy. Crossley ID guides, but I would think, there's quite a lot of young birders around today. So if you can connect him with other young birders, I wanted to be part of a fraternity. To be part of a club. I felt like I belonged to another group. So I always think it's important if you can find groups of other kids. They all communicate now through whatever it is, Facebook or whatever. So there are some different groups. That's the one thing I would encourage. I mean, I'm not joking aside. I would, for the kids, my books are the best because it's Where's Waldo. It's all about discovering, keep on looking, and they're the most lifelike. The things on the internet, I'm not a big internet person. I'm not a big social media person or any of that stuff. So for me, I always just want to be outside. So I would encourage him though to be outside as much as he can, and to take field notes. So if my house, I'm not joking here, if my house burns down, the first thing I will grab will be my field notebooks where I took field notes from as a kid. They're priceless to me, and because they're my life's journey, and I learned so much from it. And so I would encourage him to take field notes. And while some of this is not what kids do today, it's still the best thing. Is to go out, just get him outside, take him field notes. I would look at them, share them, celebrate them with him, get him to try and practice drawing a little bit. All the best birders in the world, no exceptions, at some point in their life took field notes. It forces you to look. So you can't be an elite birder unless you take field notes. So I would encourage that. Connect him with others, get him some Crossley ID guides.
Yeah, for sure. I think plugging into a network, a group, or society, Audubon locals, getting out with other birders, picking up from them, also getting into sound identification.
Yeah,
that I think is the next step of challenge for sure. And if they can tune their ear early, man, some of those young birders blow me away. They hear a peep, and then they already know what it is.
There's one thing you got to understand: in a year, young birders in a year can become really good. They soak it up like sponges. And it's like any other sport. If you're not really good by the time you're 18 or 19, you're probably not, it's just never going to be that good. You can be really good by the time you're 14 or 15. So I've had, in the last 3 years, I've had a young guy called Daniel Irons staying at my house, probably been 3 times helping with books, and he's probably spent 9 months at my place or something. So we're trying to, he's extraordinary, will be extraordinary and a game changer. And if you had a race to find the most birds 24 hours on the east coast of America, he'd beat everybody. He's so focused. He's just spent the last 4 months living out of his pickup truck on the beach at Cape Hatteras. He's 18, which not everybody's cup of tea. Birds all day, and it's just incredible. But I'm hoping he's going to become a real game changer. Obviously, a lot of the other young people watch him, and he finds just ridiculous things all the time. He's just brilliant and incredible. And So, trying to get guys like Daniel Irons, get him on Facebook is really good. So with these young kids today, if they're being allowed to use Facebook or whatever, then get them connected to other young birders in the country, like-minded bird, and try and get them in that club.
Absolutely.
eBird is, the list thing, the one thing, birders go through a progression. They get into birding, then they want to be part of a fraternity. They often want to collect, do bird races, do lists. Then they usually want to travel, either North America, certainly South America, around the world. But if they start young, they've done that by the time they're 23 or 4, and then they really often dedicate, it's their life then, and they dedicate it, and those are the real game changers.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What's his name, so I can keep an eye out for him?
What's his name?
The young boy the lady was asking about.
Lisa was talking about her daughter, I assume, her 12-year-old.
Oh, it was a daughter. I thought it said boy. I apologize.
No, it's okay. I saw her.
Lots of young women, lots of young women and girls, lots of young female birders.
Her name is Aria.
Aria, yeah. Well, for Aria, there's lots of other young female birders. Sometimes they're not as obsessed as with listing and things, which is a great thing. And they often see the big picture better, which I actually like, and often draw on things. So I think there's lots. You could probably find plenty of friends out there. I think
it's helpful for young people to have a mentor.
Yeah.
And if they don't have one, if she doesn't have one yet, you could try to find a mentor for her, maybe by attending local field trips.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in the world that we're in now with social media, it actually tends to be even a little easier to find a mentor online. So getting involved with something like iNaturalist, where you get to comment on everyone else's identifications. I know it's not exactly what Richard would say is the best option. It's not all about identification, but it's helping you get involved in a community and helping you attach to other people. And you just know people by a screen name. And sometimes that's even better because you can build a relationship via a social media network. You can follow that person, see what they're seeing today. Oh, that leads you to go ask a question. Where should I go next? And so, Teresa, I would highly suggest iNaturalist, especially the phone app, really good for that. Same thing can be done with the Merlin Bird ID app. You can do that same kind of thing. It just lacks some of that social connection.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only thing is we like the Merlin thing. And first off, a lot of it's wrong, but the idea is discovery. It's not the name. What happens when people learn the names? They stop looking at the birds, and you can see the standard of birding in this country is just it's terrible, and but so we often do workshops, and and you talk to them about how to look at things and think it out, and people really struggle because they just don't know how to ask questions. So again, it's this note taking, and so the answer really is bad news. It really is, because it means you don't learn the thing. But the good thing is if you can get them in those groups, so they do have the different camps. It's so important to get other kids that they get to know and communicate. They just feed off each other. So they do have a number of camps. Unfortunately, it costs a bit of money. But also, like Holly Merker, as I said, co-author for ornithotherapy, she has led lots of kids camps over the years. And she's definitely a mentor to lots of young, well, not just female, but lots of young birders, and so I think both those points, the mentors, but particularly meeting other kids, is so important.
And there are scholarships available to go to some of those camps.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah, you can get scholarships. There's lots of scholarships if you're really keen. Yeah.
Yes, in fact, CFO has a youth scholarship to support youth attending birding events or conventions or birding camps. I think Bird Conservancy of the Rockies puts one on every summer. where they put youth together. They probably have finished for this year, but I know some of the youth here in the Roaring Fork Valley, Audubon, have attended that this year. So there are some little groups of birding experiences to look into.
Also, the American Birding Association holds a camp every summer.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think Victor Manuel does, Michael and Louise, Michael O'Brien, Louise, Michael's, fantastic, I think they usually do them for Victor. There's a few different ones out there, which usually have really good leaders, and I think a lot of the kids, I think it's a group of kids, so there aren't that many do the camps, but if you go to one camp, you almost, you get to know lots of kids, and then they know lots. It's really good. There's some really, because I've talked to a lot of the kids, so I know there's a really strong fraternity out there, which is really exciting, Wish I'd had it.
Buzz, it looked like you had a question that you were getting ready to say, but you've gone off video now. Do you still have a question in there?
How's birding in Colorado doing? Is it great? It seems like there's loads of outdoor birders and out in Colorado. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd say birding is pretty healthy in Colorado.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It seems it.
Our membership, for example, has gone up considerably over the last 2 years, and that's a good sign. But we've got a long ways to go, I think, to capture most of the community out there as our members. But I think it's a sign that there's an increase in interest in birds. Yeah.
Well, I know COVID has bird food sales, I'm sure Nick, has gone up through the roof. So. Yeah, and that, I think in England, like I was saying before, that's how you learned to bird, was looking at the birds in your garden. So it was on TV all the time about nature in your garden, and still is live. I mean, now in Britain, it's live 5 nights a week from 8 till 9 BBC 2 for well over half the year. It's been like that for 15, 16 years. So people always have this connection to their garden. And for me, the garden or the yard or whatever you call it, that's the most important thing. It's everything starts at home, right? And with the things that you see every day. But we haven't taught people to look at birds properly. So we did a workshop in Los Angeles a few weeks ago. A guy set it up, been birding all his life, runs a very successful Wild Birds Unlimited shop. So I said, we just did a little thing outside in a nature center, and we did small groups, but each group was an hour and a half long. All we did was most of them was just look at a male house sparrow on the top of a nest box. We couldn't drag anybody away. Because when they started watching it and we started talking about it, and they started to getting into its life and why it was shaking its wing and sticking its tail up and how often it was singing and why it was doing it. And then the female, everybody suddenly became voyeurs, and they really didn't give a damn about the Allen's hummingbirds and all the other stuff, because they got into the life. So this guy's like, my God, I've been birding all my life. I've seen millions of them. I've never bloody looked at house sparrow once. I had no clue. And this is what people want to see. This is what we've got to be celebrating, is what's right outside. I mean, very few people really know the birds that are right outside the window that they see every day. And, so it's these cardinals and, hummingbirds, and that's what people really want to know about. They're not really interested in, vast majority of people are not interested in rarities, but that's what we always talk about. So hopefully we can change that, Yeah.
Indeed. Well, I think we've probably come to a natural ending for tonight.
Good.
So
My
thank you very
bedtime.
much.
11 o'clock.
Yeah, thank you so very much for staying up late for us and for giving this wonderful
talk. No, I don't sleep very much. Not a good sleeper.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
If you're getting back out there and birding, I'm sure you will have another project before you know it. So enjoy your break while you have it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, hopefully I would love to come out to Colorado and maybe hopefully do some in-person things like we discussed before. You know, it's just I think just such a fantastic state, you know, love Colorado. So I think everybody, assuming everybody's from Colorado, just think you're so lucky to be living in such a beautiful place, you know, with such fantastic wide open spaces. Quite jealous, you know.
You're definitely invited for sure.
Okay, good.
Welcome to come. With that, everyone, thank you so much for attending. It was a pleasure to host this evening. If you have time in the next few weeks, we would love your input on our survey. We want to make this organization for you. You'll find it around our different platforms of communication, and hopefully we'll get to meet with Richard in person hopefully next year when we all get to hang out in person again. We can't wait. And this fall for all the fantastic field trips that Sue is putting together to go check out some shorebirds. Nothing better than birding in company.
Thank you.
Good night, and thank you.
Yeah, just gonna say thank you for inviting me along, and thank you for listening for everybody. I wish all of you the best, you know, and stay safe, but get outside, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Good night, folks.
All right. Thank you. Good night.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, guys. Thank you for everything.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it. And yeah, we really do hope that, you know, if things work out and you're free next May, it'd be great to have you come out and be able to do something, even though this year, like you said, you know, didn't go intended to plans and we had all the kibosh on everything, but next year.
So Stephanie, feel free to end the recording.